Hi everybody, my name is Daryl Story and I come to you from St. Margaret's Episcopal Church in Bellevue, Washington. That's the state. I live in Redmond, almost in the heart of the mighty Microsoft, and I'm really happy to be here with you. When we first started talking about what this workshop would cover, my initial thought was to talk about music and leading music within the prison ministry. As I'm a worship leader, that's primarily what my role is. The prison ministry that I'm involved in is called Kairos International. Anyone remember the cookies? I'll talk a bit more about that. In fact, I got to thinking about how we would cover all of this, and I realized that I needed to go further into depth about the prison ministry itself. So we'll have more information about Kairos prison ministry and the women that are incarcerated, as well as some music, some singing, and where it plays a role. I should quickly mention that this workshop venture is a new one for me, one that I enjoy very much. But you saw that coming. God is apparently making a new pathway, a new journey for me, and I'm all in. So I have not done a lot of presentations. I have not done a lot of presentations with music, and I have not done any presentations with a PowerPoint. But it's all good. It's in God's hands, right? When I was first asked to join the Kairos prison ministry, I thought, like maybe some of you, that I'd encounter your stereotypical prisoner with the gray stringy hair, missing some teeth, although that is a hallmark of methamphetamine addiction. So that one actually is true. Cinder block cells with bars on the doors. I couldn't have been more wrong. The prison campus looks somewhat like a well-manicured college campus, surrounded, albeit in layers of razor wire. The gardens are beautiful, and the inmates are housed primarily in dorm-like houses that look sort of like the post-World War II portables. The prison in Washington State, WCCW, is overcrowded and was meant to hold 900 women and currently holds between 1,100 to 1,300 inmates. The incarcerated women, on the average, are 40 to 50 years old. 80% of these women are mothers. 3/4 of them are survivors of domestic abuse, whether physical, sexual, or both. 82% of them were abused as children. 8 out of 10 prisoners are survivors of abuse in some manner. Most of the offenses that women are incarcerated for include drugs and property crimes, or crimes of self-defense. Women also come into the prison with a higher amount of trauma prior to arrest through sexism, racism, poverty, domestic violence, sexual and substance abuse. And many women cannot afford probation as a prison alternative and are thus imprisoned. Women are the largest growing segment of the prison population today. These women could be you or me, only younger. They could be your babysitters. They are the women that stand next to you in line at the grocery store. They are your neighbors. By the time we see them in the prison setting, they have had their drug problems cleaned up, and they have had a lot of time to think about what got them there. They've had time to become very strong Christians. The primary thing that they have not been able to do is forgive themselves, to love themselves. It currently costs approximately $47,000 to house one inmate for 1 year. That's a heck of a lot more money than I make. These costs keep going higher as the cost for health insurance, taxes, and keeping the prison staffed continue to rise. Taxpayers spend $60 billion a year on the prisons in their communities. And unfortunately, 50% of these prisoners return to prison. The recidivism rate in Washington state is approximately 70% to 30%, with 70% of the population returning to the prison. I'd like to tell you a story from a woman that I met when I first started going into the Washington Correctional Center for Women. Her name is Gina, and when we met, she was the leader for the Inside Kairos group. So she had been through her Kairos weekend and had worked in the background team, and then she became the leader of the Kairos alumni Inside. And this is her story. As a young girl, I lived in a house where abuse was almost as common as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My mother's husband abused me as well as my mother. I ran away when I was 12 years old and never looked back. At the age of 12, I found myself living on the streets where I was selling drugs to make ends meet and so that I could eat. I slept in burned down, abandoned buildings, 24-hour laundromats, and I stole food out of the Safeway garbage cans. I was not able to go to school because my mother's husband was searching for me. When I turned 16 years old, one of my friends told me that I could come and live with her family. But I had been on the street so long, I did not know how to be a part of a family or how anyone would want me when my own family didn't. Eventually, I did go back and lived with them. I tried to go back to school, but the streets always called my name, and I went back. At the age of 26, I was arrested for drugs and drug-related crimes. I was sentenced to 11 years in prison. The first 5 years, I was in fights. I was in trouble, and I went to segregation many times because I thought I had to be this bad person and this dirty person. I did not believe in God. I did not believe in a God who would let me suffer so much at a young age. When I was in prison, I met some women who attended Kairos. I watched them walk out of every event with joy and love, feelings I had never felt before. I was jealous. I wanted to see what that was all about. So I went to the Kairos event and found myself engulfed in love, even though I still felt dirty. I always thought the women of that caliber would never have time or heart for me, but I was wrong. When I accepted the necklace around my neck saying I accepted God, I never meant anything more in my life. I ran for Kairos leader and won 2 years in a row, which was almost never heard of because technically you're not supposed to lead Kairos more than once. Because of Kairos, I made friendships with women that were healthy, that were strengthening. And that led me into some of the activities that I do today. I work with the IF project with at-risk youth. And upon my release from prison, I went back to college because I had belief in myself. I still had the support of some of my mentors that I met at Kairos. These mentors are still in my life now. I go back into the prison every month to help people who are releasing get into school so they can change their lives. I still work with at-risk youth, and I also work with the homeless community because I know what it's like to be out on the streets and forgotten. I testify with legislators and senators at legislative sessions to try and change our laws. The men and women from Kairos who supported me loved me right where I was at until I could love myself. Because of that, I am now able to love others right where they are at. Many of the women that were at my first Kairos are still in my life and still my mentors today. Kairos truly changed my life, and the support of these women who I believed were out of my league have now shown me that there really isn't a league at all. We are all God's children and are supposed to be loving one another. I was able to make amends with my mother before she passed away. I was there when my granddaughter was born. I am married now and working as a peer support counselor to youth and adults. I found my purpose and I am living my dream. I would like to add that Gina has continued to work with the post-Christian education program. She's worked with the Goodwill Youth programs. She currently works with the IF project, as well as Love Overwhelming and Janice Youth, which works with abused, neglected, and homeless children. She very recently met her birth family and just got to celebrate Father's Day with her birth father and siblings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this Kairos program. What is it? Their website says they are a ministry focused on the transformation of lives. For 34 years, trained and dedicated Kairos volunteers have entered minimum and maximum security prisons with their only goal to be instruments of God, transforming lives of the incarcerated and their families. It only makes sense that the only way to rehabilitate someone is to change their heart. That leads to the transforming their lives, that leads to a future of hope, impacting the world in a positive way. How many of you have made your Curcio? Kairos is patterned after the Episcopal Christian Weekend and was originally called Curcio in Prison back in 1979 when it started in Florida. The program was so successful, after 10 years they changed their name to Kairos, which means God's special time. An example of God's special time is that of a mother about to give birth. The doctor says the baby is due on July 10th. That is Chronos time. When the baby arrives on July 9th, that is Kairos time. The ministry is active in 11 countries internationally and serves in 494 prisons in all but 13 U.S. states. The latest, in Gatesville, Florida, had their first weekend just this last March. Volunteers are the heart of Kairos. Kairos volunteers donated more than 3 million hours in 2017 by attending team meetings for training and preparation, serving on the weekend, and then regularly attending and mentoring in accountability groups known as Prayer and Share. Volunteers raised $4 million in this $5.5 million industry, with 81% of these monies going toward the weekends. The team members are required to spend 35 hours in team formation prior to the weekend. This gives us the tools to come into the prison united, focused as one. It also gives us the tools and the information that we need to understand our guests. And the meetings are fun. We spend a couple hours on a Saturday and we eat good food and we have small groups. We sing a lot of music. We eat more good food. We sing more music. And we also get a lot of work done. So a key outcome of the weekend is the formation of Prayer and Share small groups, or an accountability group in Curcio. This is where the transformation begins. The participants learn to support each other through prayer and encouragement. And what is said at Kairos stays at Kairos. Kairos is an interdenominational group. We come from many ministries with many different theologies. So we do not talk about the things that divide us. We talk about the things that unite us. We serve as the instruments of God, and with Him, help transform lives of the incarcerated. God changes hearts. Salvation is the natural outcome, right? And the exciting outcome is that more than 260,000 people have been introduced to Kairos, and nearly all that number have chosen to accept Christ. Think of the impact of that. I personally witnessed more than 300 women that have chosen to accept Christ through the Kairos program. If that isn't furthering the kingdom of God, I don't know what is. Do you have any questions? Any comments so far? I'm sure you do. So, I thought we would stand up and stretch our legs a little bit, and I told you we would sing. And so this is Chainbreaker, and it's a current song that we are singing in the women's prison that the women like so much that they don't need the words for it anymore. And, it's a song that just speaks to their circumstances. It's called Chainbreaker. It's popular on Christian radio. So here's the lyrics, and let's stand up and have at it. Okay? So we're not done singing now. Boy, that was fun. Okay. So how does this all work? We start out by building a team, just like the Curcio weekend. We have team members that will do an inspirational talk. We have an observing leader, a leader, and an advising leader. And of course, we have a music team. When we come into the prison, the women are closed off, skeptical, and for a number of reasons can't forgive themselves for the things they've done. But also, the prison environment doesn't exactly invite sharing warm fuzzies with your fellow inmates. It's a hard place to live. People are manipulative, friendships are short-lived, and the hierarchy in the prison is a little different than what you'd find in a men's prison. Since women are primarily nurturers, they tend to group together in units that are similar to a family unit, with a mom who is generally the leader, an extroverted, charismatic, take control kind of person, with her kids, her children, the people she mentors, the people she instructs, or in worst case scenarios, the people that she demands that they do what she says. The Kairos weekend likes to invite the moms or the ringleaders. They hold a lot of influence in the prison. And not only does their involvement in Kairos create a better environment there, but it invites the family members to come along as well. So we get more bang for our buck. The recidivism rate for women that have been involved in a Kairos weekend in Washington State basically flip-flops from the national average to 20% recidivism. That is, only 20% of the women that graduate from a Kairos weekend do not come back to the prison. Do go back to the prison. 80% of them do not. So a quick aside here with some other programs. Kairos International also includes a couple other programs that bring community to those family members that are impacted by incarceration. One is called Kairos Outside, which brings the love of Christ and community to women that have family members that are in prison. So that would be wives, sisters, other family members. When a family member is incarcerated, the family does prison time along with them, but without the bars. Another program is called Kairos Torch. Depending on where you live, this can be held inside or outside the prison. It's for kids that are under the age of 18, I believe. We had a pilot program in Washington State that ran for 5 years that was called Torch Outside. It encompassed all the transformation and the love of God in a summer camp format. It included games, trust exercises, crafts and more crafts, discussion about masks, why we wear them, how we wear them, and being authentic. And music. It is truly an amazing program, and I highly recommend that if you run across this group, that you make an attempt to work with them in any number of ways. It's an incredibly worthwhile program, and it's hitting kids at a younger age, and it works to stop that cycle of incarceration that tends to happen in families. I've also been involved in Kairos Outside. So if you'd like more information on these programs, I've included links on the handout sheet, or come and talk to me about them. So, what does a Kairos weekend look like? The weekend is a very structured and intentional process. It begins somewhat generically with little or no reference to God. Then it slowly opens the door to self-forgiveness and God's love. This journey confronts bad choices, includes an experiential encounter with the love of God, resulting in a changed heart and a hope for a different life ahead. It begins with a series of talks that are scripted and very precise with their message. That also includes testimony from the speaker. Some of the women volunteers have been incarcerated themselves. Some have had some of the issues that have gotten people incarcerated: alcohol, drugs abuse. So these testimonies aren't from a bunch of fuddy-duddy old Christian ladies. They are from peers. We are speaking from personal experience, and with God's heart, we can empathize with the brokenness of all of us. We did not ask why our guests are incarcerated or how much time they have to serve. Our objective is to bring God's unconditional love into their lives in the prison and beyond. God's unconditional love rains down onto the participants through volunteers and through the prayers of hundreds from the Kairos community. Our motto is listen, listen, love, love. So on Friday morning, we start with a talk that is called Choices. Isn't that a good place to start? Many of these women do not have the resources that you or I might have when we determine our thought processes and the things that we do. I met one woman who at the age of 2 was orphaned by her drug addict mother. She lived with her grandmother until she was 7. When the grandmother passed away, she lived on the streets and joined the gangs. She ended up in prison. Like Gina, when your whole life is about learning how to survive and you have no mentors, you have no role models, you have no avenues open to you or the awareness of where they might be, it's easy to step into the wrong path. Now, I'm not condoning criminal behavior. I'm not saying that it's right. I think many of these women know they're doing the wrong thing. But they don't have the resources. They don't have the know-how to get away from it. These women also self-medicate. It's numbing. Prior to the first talk, Choices, I've been singing a song that's called You Are More, another Christian radio song, and the lyrics pretty much speak to the whole idea of being valued beyond the bad choices that you've made. So it's called You Are More, and I thought we would sing it. So let's all have a stand up again. I have to tell you that this standing up business is a pretty new thing to me. If you were in my workshop yesterday, I spoke a bit about that. I am exactly 6 weeks post-op from back surgery, and the issue prior to that was that I couldn't stand up and I couldn't walk. So that was 9 months of sitting down every time they said stand as able. So I am so excited to get to stand up and sing with you guys and kind of dance around. So come on and join me. Okay. The talks proceed throughout the day with these topics. You are not alone. Friendship with God. And then we move into a group that is called the Forgiveness Series. This is instrumental on the weekend because it walks the inmates through a process of accepting themselves, accepting others, forgiving themselves, and forgiving others, and God's role in that process. There are 4 topics done by the same person, and they usually involve a story or a thread that works its way through all 4 of the talks, talking about finding their own forgiveness and their own path. So after the first of the forgiveness series, we have acceptance of self. There is a talk called The Church, Opening the Door, and then the second forgiveness talk, Accepting God's Forgiveness. So I come into this ministry as a worship leader. I am not a performer, obviously, and this is not a performance. There are some things that I have learned in the 10 years in this ministry. One, and most importantly, it is a Spirit-led ministry. And as yesterday in my workshop on Spirit-led music, we talked a bit about the ways that you can be Spirit-led in your worship music. Music is the instrument that touches these women's hearts. It's a place where the women come into the weekend, close it off, and somehow in there the music resonates. It makes its way through to them. Music is the way to send a message and receive a message. It touches the heart and soul when the exterior is closed. When the heart is broken, music is the conduit. As a music leader, I play and sing contemporary radio music. At the institution in Washington, this is what the inmates listen to. And although some of the team members may grumble about it, and yes, they do, when we get to the weekend and they see and hear a room full of our Kairos guests singing their hearts out to these songs that they know, it's a God-filled moment for everybody. I try to keep my music queued up. The attention span in the room is quite short, and I don't like to lose a single person. So if you don't get right into the next song pretty darn fast, you'll start to hear the chit-chat and the whispers in the room. So I get everything done ahead of time as far in advance as well as I can. I make song lists in advance, and that allows me to be truly Spirit-led when the weekend commences, because I don't have to worry about what's next. I've already prayed about it. It's all done. And then if I'm led to change a song at the last minute, it's an easy thing to do. The music team needs to be aware of the energy, or lack thereof, in the room. It's our job to use music to lead the emotional experience. For example, if we are moving toward the forgiveness series on the forgiveness service on Saturday afternoon, we want to start bringing the music down into a contemplative mode. We might choose songs about healing and forgiveness. On Saturday evening, when we're all getting a little fatigued and silly, well, we pull out all the fun songs, and boy, does that get hilarious. We also sing if there's an unexpected pause in the weekend. We won't start any of the talks until all of the guests are there and seated. On one of my very first Kairos weekends, one of the young women needed to go take care of a medical issue, and she said she'd be right back. And so the leaders opted to hold the beginning of the weekend presentation and just sing some songs while we waited. So we sang some songs, and then we sang some songs, and then we sang some more songs, and we sang some more songs. This girl came back 2 hours later, and I think I had sung every song in the songbook. That's good training. So I thought we'd sing some more, but this is probably another good spot to have any other comments or questions. I know I've thrown a fair amount out at you, and so why don't we stop here and talk about some of this. Okay. We're back. So what are some of the logistics about the weekend? Where do we sleep? What do we eat? Important issues, right? Our day in the prison runs from about 6:30 a.m. until about 8 o'clock lately. Local churches open their doors with floors to sleep on, and they open their kitchens. And we provide a base team that prepares great breakfasts and a meal for us when we get back. We bring our own sleeping bags and air mattresses and things of that nature. Sometimes we sleep with friends. Some people live close by so they can sleep at home. Sleep is not a highlight of these weekends. We eat in the prison with the inmates, and we eat what they are eating. And you know what? It isn't that bad. Aside from being extremely low in meat content, soy. It really is pretty good. Although I sometimes suspect that they swap the menus around a bit when we're coming. I think I've only had maybe 3-4 meals that were kind of hard to eat. But, you know, that's a whole bunch of other ones that were really quite good. So, in Washington, we're required to take some online training in order to receive a red badge, which allows us entrance into the prison. We can't take anything with us that hasn't already been approved, and anything that has been approved has to be searched before it's allowed inside. No cell phones, minimal jewelry, prison dress code. We go through a scanner that is like that at the airport, but probably a bit more sensitive. The weekend is held in the prison chapel, and at WCCW, that's where we spend the whole weekend. Our training teaches us how to be safe in that environment, along with prison and Kairos regulations. And in the 10 years that I've been involved in this ministry, I have never witnessed any irregularity. And so I have come to feel quite safe. So as we move into Saturday, people are getting pretty comfortable with themselves. We have formed table families, small groups. And after every topic, we have a discussion and an activity. It's usually making posters. They reflect on the talk and how it resonates in their lives. And there is an emphasis on the table leaders allowing the guest to take over more and more of the conversation. Ultimately, we want the inmates to be creating small groups without any of our team intervention so that they learn to group together and to trust each other. We start Saturday with the third in our forgiveness series, which is forgiveness of self. And that is a big one. It's followed by discovery, Christian action, and obstacles to grace. About midday, the women are asked to start considering people that they might want to forgive, and that includes themselves. They are given a small sheet of paper and asked to write down the names of these people. On Saturday evening, the forgiveness service is held. The women are encouraged to bring up their lists, to drop them into a bowl of water and to swirl them around, and they magically dissolve away. This symbolizes the washing away of hurt and resentment, giving up their pain to God. This process is hugely impactful for the women and the team. I routinely have a list to add into that water. So let's stand, let's sing another song. I have a whatever song it is that I'm going to put here because I don't know what it is yet. I was thinking something along the I've been redeemed because of the chaplain's car reference. And I think we need to do something that's quick and fun. So awesome, you guys. That was so much fun. So Sunday, we're wrapping up the weekend. We reiterate the topics. And you can't help but see the difference in these women. From the state they were in when they arrived on Thursday night and what they look like now as we're ready to have our closing ceremony. Closing, by the way, is a time when the participants get to stand up and talk about how the weekend has impacted them. And they do this in front of the community, and they do this in front of the background team, which are their friends in the prison that have already done the Kairos weekend. So they are all there to encourage these women in their new acceptance of Christ. The women are truly transformed. And when you come into this ministry, you will find that it gives back to you far more than you bring to it. And it does time and time again. When you see the hand of God painting a brushstroke of forgiveness on these women, there is nothing like it. So here we are. And since I did say on the syllabus that we would be singing some music, I thought we would conclude with singing some more songs as you'd like. We do have an evaluation that will take about 5-10 minutes. I'd love for you to fill that out. I have handouts for you as well. And they have some further information about music copywriting, the Kairos International link, There is a link to an amazing video that I encourage you to watch called Tommy's Story. There are also the links to Kairos, Outside and Kairos Torch. There's a lot of good information on the Kairos website. I encourage you to take a look at it when you get home, or when you get back to your room, for that matter. I've also included the names of the talks that we have on the weekend and the songs that we used on the last weekend. So if you want to, you can get a little bit of a reference as to how those songs bookend the talks and how they all tie together. If you're interested in further helping in this ministry, you can do several things. First and foremost, the foundation of Kairos is prayer. Gifts. Your financial gifts fuel the growth of this ministry. Kairos is 100% transparent in where their funding goes. And you will see that as well on their website. You can volunteer. Get involved in changing hearts and transforming. Become a team member. And share our story. If you're involved in Rotary or other public service groups, talk about Kairos. Look into attending a closing near you. This gives you a bird's eye view into the beauty of God at work, and you will see the actual transformation in these women. Please feel free to email me or contact me through Facebook with your questions, your comments. I'd love to hear your stories, your experiences in this ministry. I thank you so much for being with me, for your attention, your interest, but mostly for being the hands and feet of God in the world. Thank you, guys. Here's your evaluation forms if you can pass these down. And I think we'll just sing some songs as we end up the session. Thanks again.